Greetings, Matt Fields, coming to you with the news of the week, which has been pretty intense. Again, I am a writing candidate for governor of the state of Utah. You can go check out my proposal at govmat.org, where you can download the text or the audio. You can also go to Rumble. There's a link there at govmat.org where you can click through, or maybe you have to copy and paste, but you can go to Rumble and listen to the entire proposal. There's also another book on there for free, which is called Living the Fabled Tale, The Emperor's New Clothes, which goes through a lot of the information that has taken place between 2020 and 2022 or so. It was when I wrote that book. But I encourage you to go take a look. That's what basically all the information there has been sourced, and I provide my sources, and you can check me on it. And if you have a problem with it, then take it up with the source, not me. Or perhaps maybe I misinterpreted it, and let's talk. But there has been a lot of things that have happened over the course of the last week, and I'd like to hit up those. Obviously, the one that's forefront is Trump, and I'll get to that in a second. But I do want to discuss some of these other things first, talking about what's happening in Utah and the things that are specific to Utah. And I wanted to begin with, kind of related to what happened with Trump, is that Utah is seeing an increased threat of political officials. And this is based upon, this is an article from KSL. It says Utah is seeing an increase in political threats, Department of Public Safety head says. So if you go through the article, it doesn't specifically, provide any data, so to speak, but it does show instances where people have, made fake bomb threats, they've done different hoaxes, they've, so on and so on, and there's quite a bit more than what they usually handle, and that is disconcerting, of course, and that largely is due to the fact that we have a political class and we have the media that continue to take the events of the day and the cause du jour and all these other things and say, hey, you have to live by these things, and if you don't live by these things, then you are a fascist, or you are a Nazi, or you are fill in the blank of something that is totally and completely out of context and inappropriate to say, right? It's if, for example, if Trump went up and said that Biden was a fascist and that he was a Nazi, the media would have a heyday with that. Of course, they have said the exact same thing about Trump, that he is a fascist and that he is Hitler reincarnated and all these sorts of things. Although they can't actually point to any specific instances, they might try and take some of the things that he said out of context and replace them and make the comparison that is drastically inappropriate and does not actually reflect the values that he has espoused. And to be clear, I actually never voted for Trump. I can talk about that another time, and you can read a little bit about that in my book as to why I haven't done that. But the important part is that we cannot, the one thing that might be somewhat beneficial in the idea of what Governor Cox has said is to disagree better, is we do, in some ways, we have to make sure that we are speaking correctly, and we aren't trying to, even though I don't necessarily credit Cox for doing this, but we need to make sure that we are calling a spade and providing the context and references appropriate in order to back up our claims and the things that we're saying, because these are the issues that we face today, and people are all out of sorts because they believe one thing is happening because that's what they've been told, and they haven't taken the time to research or understand it themselves. We have to stop listening to our institutions. We have to stop listening to the media. Don't listen to me. Everything I say, go check it. Go make sure what I'm saying is correct. Don't believe me. You cannot do that. We can no longer do that anymore in the society in which we live. And the only way we're going to get on track is if we start using our own brains and we start being adults and we recognize that if we do not decide to make this change, then there's no way that we're going to come out on top of this. So this leads into some other things that have happened in the state, and there's two other things that three other things I'm going to go to, and then two other things I'm going to go to, and then I'll hit up Trump, and then I have one last thing. But there was recently, because of HB 261, which essentially attacks DEI, diversity and equity inclusion. The former head of the University of Utah Diversity Division this is a story from KSL, is axed because of it, is stepping down. And I say bravo to that. Not that she's losing her job, but that something that has no relevance whatsoever in the workplace or in any other place should be considered in any way, shape, or form. I've made it clear, and I've talked about, I provide spiritual thoughts from time to time. And in that instance, the thing that always blows me away is that living in a state full of Latter-day Saints, and not just Latter-day Saints, but Christians, and I don't know exactly what the Christian population total is in Utah, but I would say it's bumping up there next to 90%. And when we look in the Bible and we look in the Book of Mormon, we find that the Canaanites and the Israelites were separated, and they created classes, and the same thing happens with the Nephites and Lamanites, and they create classes, and all these different things continue to happen. And for some reason, we are unable to recognize, those that are opposed to something like this are unable to recognize the issue that we have with our own divisions. For some reason, we always like to take a group of people and break them up into teeny tiny parts and try and highlight certain people within those groups to make them feel bigger or better or whatever the case may be. And to have diversity in a particular university has nothing to do with the quality of the university, has nothing to do with the skill of that university. It has nothing to do with anything, right? I talk about this in my book, Morality Over Monarchy, again, govmat.org. But, excuse me, one of the examples I give is the comparison between engineers in the workforce and nurses in the workforce. And there are significantly more engineers in the workforce that are male, white males, versus those that are women or any minority. And it's significant. It's something like 80%, 85, maybe even 90% of all of them are white males. Okay. Now, if you're going to take from the pool of, if you're going to select the best engineer within that entire space, you are most likely going to find the majority of those highly skilled engineers to be a white male. Okay. Now, that doesn't matter. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that is the case. It doesn't matter that this would really make a difference. What I'm trying to illustrate is the fact that just because there's a higher number of engineers that are white males rather than a bunch of women or black guys or whatever, it doesn't mean that we're failing as a society. That just happens to be the way that it is, right? If you look at psychological data, you'll find that men are much more interested in things, and as a result, they find themselves in engineering because they're interested in building things, mechanically or civilly or whatever. And then the other example I give are nurses. And a huge chunk of nurses, again, a similar comparison, something like 80 or 90%, are women. Okay, so if you look at that entire group of people and try and select the best nurses, most likely what you'll find is they're going to be all women. Now, that isn't bad either. Okay, that's just the way it is. Women are more interested in people. And that's why psychologically they're more interested in people, and that's why they go out to these positions that are caring for people and all those sorts of things, as opposed to men. And so just because, are we going to seek to equalize the people in the engineering department and in the nursing department and all these other things? And the answer, of course, is no, because you can't force people to go in a particular field. The difference is that they're allowing more and more people to enter into fields that at the end of the day they actually won't succeed in. And let me give an example. There was Thomas Sowell, who's a researcher, very well known. Those of you that don't know him, you can Google him and find a bunch of information on him. He was kind of a liberal himself, to begin with when he started doing his studies, but before too long he recognized the flaws in his ways as he did the research. He found that if you accepted a minority, a woman, a black person, whatever, into any particular position, into any particular college, school, or whatever it may be, and they weren't as qualified as the other people there, they will perform. They'll obviously won't perform as well, but they'll also have a higher likelihood of dropping out. It's better that they're accepted into a not as prestigious school, or that they go into another program or something where they can actually succeed and have success. They are setting people up to fail because they are more focused on diversity than they are the quality of their work and their ability to succeed, right? I find medical things relatively disgusting. And if I was able to get into a medical school, I most likely would have pursued that option, because when I was younger, my objective was to find a career that would make me a lot of money. Now, I've been in business my whole life, and I've done well, and I've been very happy. But had I had the option to go into a medical school with ease, then I probably would have done it. But I quickly would have realized how awful it is, in my opinion, and would instantly probably fail in that pursuit because I don't like it and I don't appreciate it, and retaining that kind of information is difficult for me, and on and on goes the list. So that can happen with anybody. Anyone can have difficulty in all these different things, and that's why the DEI initiatives that have been passed thus far are good things. Now, there could be some changes here and there, but the idea that we're eliminating the ability that the state has to select people from certain groups and give them a way in easier than their colleagues or other students is wrong. Okay, that's playing favorites, that's picking winners, the whole thing. So I'm happy that has happened. Not that she's lost her job. She's stepping down. She's probably got a PhD in this and that and whatever else. It's not as though she won't be able to find a job, of course. It's that those sorts of programs are being eliminated because they have no need. They don't provide anything. It's like if you go into lesbian dance theory. These are actual degrees that have been produced by colleges that don't actually merit any good in society. Okay, if anyone pushing someone to go into like DEI styled degrees and that sort of thing, they're doing a disservice. And in my opinion, and honestly not just in my opinion, but if you actually review the facts, you'll find that the majority of the jobs that are available today are technical jobs. People that have to learn a very specific skill in order to employ it, right? And the issue is that what we've taught our kids for years and years and years is that you need to go to college in order to move on to the next step. And that's wrong. Okay, you don't need to go to college. You need to learn something you can be good at and that you can pursue, and maybe college is part of that plan, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a part of that plan. And let me tell you right now, I majored in sociology. Now, there are little minors and emphasis, blah, 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 whatever, but it doesn't matter. That didn't do anything for me. There was nothing directly applicable that I could apply from that degree into anything I've done since then, which is saying something. When you spend that much time and that much money to get a degree at a good university and it really doesn't render you any benefit, that is a problem. That's a massive problem. Okay? I mean, it's the same thing with people getting business degrees. I mean, why do you need to go and get a business degree in order to run a business? You don't. You don't. If you're savvy enough and if you're willing to learn, you can go on and learn these things on your own. And that sort of thing exists across the board. I mean, if you're going to go, in my opinion, if you're going to go to school and you can do something that is directly applicable as soon as you graduate, then go for it. Like if you want to be a nurse, go in and get your nursing degree. You will be hired instantly, and you'll have skills that will instantly be able to be applied. It's the same thing with a lot of these technical schools. right? There's people that are learning how to develop apps, and they're learning how to code, and they're learning to do all these different things. Those things are directly applicable to your job, and employers love it because they don't have to train an employee. A guy that has a sociology or a psychology degree, or name any of the social sciences for the most part, unless you've got a PhD and you've been doing statistics or something like that, and you're able to go, but statistics is math. That's not really sociology. But you wouldn't be able to actually begin working at an efficient level until much later in your career. And that's why not only is it good that these DEI type programs are eliminated, but also that we start re-educating people and making them understand that certain degrees are good, but others are not. And we have to tell the truth. We have to be willing to recognize that and push aside these ideas that have basically lingered in our minds for years and years and years, and think that this is the right way to do things when it actually is not. So I'm going to move on to this next little thing that it just bothered me a little bit. It seems like Utah is always talking about how it's in a drought, and it's not in a drought actually, because a drought is defined by obviously the amount of precipitation that has happened over the course of the year and is below average. And there was a recent article, a recent thing that came through from KUER, talking about how the forecast for Utah's monsoon season is not promising, with the expectation of less rainfall compared to previous years. When right now, if you look at the information associated with the amount of water that we have received, Utah has experienced a significantly higher than average precipitation. As of mid-May 2024, the state snowpack peaked at 18.8 inches on April 2nd, surpassing the median peak of 16 inches. The reservoirs are an average of 85% capacity, with much higher than the usual 53% for this time of the year. So it's much, much, much higher than it usually is. In fact, 136% of what its average. And yet we still have people coming out talking about how we're worried about drought, we're worried about drought, we're worried about drought. It seems to be the ongoing global warming bongo that nobody wants to let up on. And again, go to govmat.org. I review over climate change and all that sort of thing, which climate change is just essentially global warming. The only thing they track is the global temperature, which, by the way, is next to impossible to track because of the multiple locations in the world. But they don't want to necessarily talk about that either. So anyway, don't get fooled by some of these different things. Don't allow yourself to believe everything you hear. It takes, honestly, nowadays it takes such little research for you to recognize what's going on that it's kind of ludicrous. Though they do attempt to hide it. If you Google certain things, it's not going to be made available to you. So you have to go to different types of search engines in order to do that, like DuckDuckGo, and there are others. And and if you don't believe me on that, go to Epstein's website. Let me see if I can find it really fast. Epstein is a scientist who had not Jeffrey Epstein. I'll have to try and find it and put it in the description. But basically, he's been featured on a handful of places, but he has essentially created a system that has found Google's ability and some of these other big tech companies to basically switch the vote and move. And he has all the statistics that are associated with it. So if you don't believe me, think I was a conspiracy theorist. This guy has all the stats, he has all the statistics, he has everything. And it's pretty impressive with what he has been able to do and what they've built. Man, I wish I could find it right now. But look, you can go Dr. Epstein. Just hang in here real fast. I'm going to see if I can find it. Dr. Epstein. Yeah, I'm not getting what I'm looking for. But he has basically kind of blown the whole thing wide open. He's made it so specific in the details that they will be able to bring lawsuits in the event that elections have been manipulated via these big tech companies. Anyways, so we have to be vigilant. We have to make sure that we're doing our own research, and we can't allow others to tell us what's going on. And you have to dig a little bit sometimes, but other times it's really easy to find what's happened. Now on to the Trump assassination attempt. If you haven't heard of it, that's crazy, especially if you're hearing it from me. That's even crazier. But Trump, obviously, just this past Saturday, there was an attempt on his life. And if you've watched the videos, I'm sure you have. I thought it was a little fishy to begin with. I have already discussed many times, I think, with others, and maybe even on this podcast. I don't recall exactly, but there will be a seismic event, a massively significant event that's going to take place before the end of 2024 or the very beginning of 2025, prior to the new president being installed, that is going to shake this country to its core. I believe that because of, frankly, because of prophecy. And I can dive deeper into that if you'd like, but I recommend Michael Rush to review some of his books. A Remnant Shall Return is a great one, and it gives a lot of information regarding some of those prophecies. Anyway, my belief is that definitely that's going to happen. Everything is played out exactly as it has been prophesied up to this point, and that is going to happen, I truly believe. And this was kind of a big warning to all of it. And why do I say that? It's because the whole thing is fishy. If you watch the video and you see the shots fired, and I encourage you to go take a look at it, it takes a while. I mean, granted, it's a couple seconds, but there are a handful of shots that are fired before there's really any response from Secret Service. And there's actually, I have a clip here that I want to share with you with people who saw minutes before, and then there was a recent report, I think it was on Fox News, that indicated that his parents of this guy who tried shooting President Trump, they reported him that he was going to do something hours before the event took place. So it's not as though this information didn't exist, but this is the most telling part as to why I believe there's something fishy going on. Listen.
We were doing the job. I wouldn't even be doing this. I get some beautiful places.
Look, they're all pointing.
The Atlantic, maybe the Pacific.
Yeah, someone's on top of the roof. Look. There he is right there. Right there. See him? He's laying down. You see him?
Yeah, he's laying down.
And still I'm here with you fighting like hell to get a Senate.
What's happening?
And to make sure we take back the White House, because if we do, we're going to make America better than other people. We're going to make it.
Yeah, look.
And
There he
it's
is.
easy, because we have millions and millions of people in our country that shouldn't be here. Dangerous people. Criminals. We have criminals. We have drug dealers. We have people that should not be here. It's much tougher than it happens.
So, I mean, that is incredibly telling and incredibly eerie, because obviously you weren't able to see the shot, or the camera shot that I was looking at. Basically, it has these people that are congregated. Trump is over there speaking, and you can hear his speech going on in the background. And they're saying, "What's going on? What's going on?" And they look over, and there's a building right there, and there's a kid, the same kid that committed this treasonous thing, was climbing on top of the building, and there's a cop right there, and they're saying, "Look, right there," and they're pointing it out, but nobody's doing anything. They don't do anything until the shots have been fired. And those shots, there's a picture, one of the guys from New York Times, I believe, those quick shutters go so fast, and they actually caught a picture of one of the first bullets that flew past Trump's face, and luckily not striking him in the head. And so this is fishy, to say the least. We don't have all the information yet, but the fact that there have been these preemptive warnings, that people right there on the ground saw this guy, and the local law enforcement, even though again you see a cop in that video, and the woman was saying, he's on the roof. The other guys, there's a guy right there on the roof. People are calling out all over the place, but no action was taken. That I find completely mind-blowing. I don't understand how that could happen when you have somebody like Trump, who's one of the most controversial presidents for a multitude of reasons, and his Secret Service isn't fully and completely prepared for this. That blows me away, and that just affirms the fact that I believe that this catastrophic event that will take place before the end of this year, I'm not sure what it is, but it will shake us to our core, and we'll find ourselves in a position the United States that hasn't found itself in since its founding. And if you don't feel that, look around you. Look around you. Lastly, I want to hit up this last little bit. Phil Lyman is going to be presenting, this is directly in relation to what's taking place in the state. And again, if you haven't, I'm not trying to over-tout my books, but the reason I keep referring back to them is because a lot of things I'm talking about are referring directly to that. And in my book, Living the Fable Tale, The Emperor's New Clothes, again, where I provide all the references and everything else that I talk about, there is very, very concerning information, particularly about the 2020 election. And the information that Phil Lyman is requesting is the same information that would be made available prior to 2020. You could access it online. And that's the same thing I did when I wrote the book. I was able to access the information in 2020 that I was able to place into a spreadsheet, and I was able to make some various configurations. And I found that during the process of looking through all of that, I found that five states actually had more than 100 votes of the total number of registered votes, more than 100% of votes of those that were registered, which of course is impossible. And that's so telling, and that's just one of the various things that I discuss in the book. But this is one of the other issues, and the fact that Lyman isn't able to obtain this information, though he should be able to receive it without having any clout whatsoever, is extremely concerning. Not to mention, there are a couple of gals called the Two Red Pills that go around, and they've been trying to audit essentially the 2020 election for the last 4+ years at this point. Well, I guess probably not quite 4 years, but almost 4 years. And they've just been hit with wall after wall after wall. The government will not allow them to receive this information. If this was the freest and fairest election of all of our lives, which is, again, that's just a total and complete nonsense. How are they defining that? What are the metrics they're using in order to arrive to that conclusion? They can't give you that information because it doesn't exist. And so when you talk about all these different things, if you're going to say something is the most secure, how is it the most secure? If it's the safest, how is it the most safe? You have to be able to provide these metrics in order to say that these things, qualitative data doesn't work in those sorts of things. Okay? We need the quantitative. And so when we review all this information from the 2020 election, and then you see this sort of thing happening, it makes you raise an eyebrow and make you wonder, why is the government so resistant to provide data that normally would be made publicly available at the click of a button, basically? And this is the problem. There is no personal data, and they keep talking about personal and private data and all this sort of thing. It doesn't talk about that at all. It talks about the individual in the county. It talks about whether they're Republican. Well, I guess in this case it would just be Republican because he's asking about the primary. But if it was a general election, say if they're Republican and Democrat, it would give you whatever but they don't provide much more information than that. This isn't something that's extremely evasive. It's just information that is generated in order to show the totals and tallies of everything that's happened throughout the state. And the fact that he hasn't been able to receive this is a problem. And if you do not think there's any level of corruption in the state of Utah, then think again. The state of Utah has been the testing grounds of many of the new ideas and concepts. When people were talking about, hey, we can't do mail-in ballots, back in 2020, people in Utah are shrugging their shoulders like, why? What's the problem? We've been doing it for years. And that. And we've been convinced, and we're so agreeable and wanting to be a law-abiding citizen and all these sorts of things, that we have allowed ourselves to have the wool pulled over our eyes, and we are being bamboozled every single day by our government officials, state and federal officials, and we have to stop letting this happen. And that's why it's crucial that we get the right kind of leadership in the state to ensure that we can be protected, at least from the greatest evil that's going to take place toward the end of this year. Now, if you think I'm talking quacky or whatever, then that's up to you. But again, have you done your research? Have you looked at these things? You don't have to believe me. I'm not trying to convince you to vote for me. That's something you have to arrive to on your own. So I encourage you, go read my books, govmat.org. Listen to, again, you can listen to them. They're not super long listens. You can pound through them pretty quick while you're mowing the lawn or whatever, and before too long you'll get an idea of what I'm about, and you'll see all the references that I provide. And if you want to talk even more turkey, then send me a message via the website, and I'll do my best to respond to as many as I can. Anyway, thank you for listening. Please make sure that you are fully aware of what's happening, because it will greatly affect you. Here, it's always greatly affected you. It's just been the slow boil of the frog that has prevented us from seeing the reality that has been approaching us even faster and faster now. And I think that's been their evil mistake, is that they've decided to move too quickly, and people are starting to notice that heat as it increases around them, as opposed to before, when most of the people just thought they were doing the right thing and they were doing what they were supposed to do and they were being patriots and blah blah blah. But now it's a totally different world that we live in from, just 5 years ago. So be well and do what you can to make sure that you're doing what you should to protect your family and your friends, and that you are taking an active role. Thank you.